Good morning, Tansei, bonjour, bonjour, comment ça va? Konnichiwa? No? Okay. Hola? No? Okay. Tikanis? No, it's Greek.
Yes.
Okay. All right, here we go. Good morning, welcome. My name is Jason Bernstick, and...
My name is Lori Menta.
All right, we had a really amazing couple of days here. Yesterday, we had Earl Lambert do his talk and do a little performance for us, which was a lot of fun. We had Jody Williams talking about the Moccasin Project. We had Kevin Chief here talking about how the bus driver showed us anything was possible. And with Wally and Karen Swain, we had the 7 phases of life. What else do we have here? We had Isaac Murdoch, Cheryl Drever, Travis Biggity, Jason Woodford. List goes on there. Lana McKay, and more Karen Swain, Sharon Drever, Travis Biggity again, and Jolie Mercer and Stephanie Sinclair. Incredible speakers. Derek Nicknack, of course, he was here as well speaking, which was amazing to hear. Jody Williams again, Lana McKay, Karen Swain. A lot of really good presenters. We had a really good time yesterday. Of course, my co-host here, Lori, also did a presentation and a talk yesterday too with Mary Burton, which was really well attended and supported. So thank you guys for getting up so early. I know you guys were out last night, some of you, at the gala, and good for you for being here this morning. Thank you so much. We're probably going to get things started a little bit later just because people are still waking up. So they'll get here, I guess, eventually. Okay. So we do have... so we're looking at that beautiful table over there. And can you just imagine watching Netflix on that big thing in your bedroom there? APTN, watching smoke signals, eating bannock, drinking tea, talking Cree. Okay? Yeah, okay.
Movies, maybe.
Yeah, lots of fun. So we have here's some of the acknowledgements for some of the business owners that donated generously to the raffle. Okay, the Delta Hotel by Marriott, and that's on Winnipeg, 3050 Street. It's a gift certificate for 2 nights stay. That's Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. Family suite includes self-parking and for 1 vehicle. The other one is the Alt Hotel. It's a gift certificate for 1 night stay for 2-night parking, which is included. The Fairmont, which is a complimentary 1 night stay, and it's a gift certificate for 1 night stay in the Gold Guest Room and breakfast for 2 in the Fairmont Gold Lounge. That sounds really nice. Megiachi Theme Restaurant, Hotel and Spa, located on 231 McDermott Ave. That's a gift certificate for a private theme suite spa. That sounds like a good time after a good night at bingo. The Clarion Hotel and Suites in Winnipeg, that's a gift certificate for 1 night stay at the Executive King, our Queen Suite. We've got the Cannon Inns, gift certificate for 1 night stay at the Executive King, our Queen Suites as well. Shipan Assorted of Merchandise. I'm not sure what it is. I haven't had a look at it yet, but I'm sure it's awesome. Jim Gaucher and Rick Therian, 2 sportswear jackets, 2 boxes of Callaway Warbird Superior golf balls, because we all love our golf, and go golf. We also have Murray Chevrolet from 700 Waverly Street, which is where I got my vehicle, I believe. We got a gift certificate for $50 and a 2017 Chevrolet Special Edition Mastio car model. Very, very sweet. Royal Bank as well on Portage Ave here. It's an assortment of merchandise. I'm not sure if it's assortment of like 10s and 20s and 50s or 100s. Do you know what it is? I don't either, so I think that's what we're looking at there. Also the RBC Convention Center for our assortment of merchandise as well. So thank you very much. And finally, we would not look as good as we do without the ENC Salon assortment of hair products. They're amazing. Thank you so much. And I do believe there's some Jet tickets out there as well. So if you like your hockey, there's some Jets tickets too. So be sure to buy your tickets for the raffle which has also been dubbed the silent auction, but it is a raffle. The names will be drawn today at 3 o'clock. So be ready. The names will be drawn today at 3 o'clock. So all the best. And if you thought that was good, there's more. Oh my goodness. Caribou Designs, to be determined what that is. I'm not sure what that is, but I'm sure it's awesome. Lush Boulevard silk shawls, incredible. There's a silversmith craft, which is amazing. Dreamcatchers promotion, which is Contra t-shirts, also amazing. The Dene Cree Designs, Pendleton turquoise blanket. Always good to cuddle under those things. Very warm on any kind of cold day. Keep you nice and cozy. We got Tika's Boutique, Shop to Shop, Eagle Spirit Gifts, Natural Fibers and Crafts, Cree Spirits Crafts, Low Creations, Ishnabe Ikwe, and of course, the one prize that everybody can see from wherever they're sitting in the room, the 58-inch 6-series television from the First Nations Family Advocate Office Fundraising Committee. The iPad 6th generation with Wi-Fi 128 gigabytes, First Nations Family Advocate Office Fundraising Committee as well. That's amazing if you like your iPads. The Fujifilm Insta Minicam. Just my good side, please. Just this side here. Yeah. Thank you. It's the third day. We're getting silly now. Look out. Bow wow pose. Okay. Holy smokes. So it's a Fujifilm Insta Mini 9 instant camera fun pack from the First Nations Family Advocate Office as well for the fundraising committee. All the proceeds will be allocated to provide Christmas hampers to help support the families that we advocate for. So thank you for your support. Have a Merry Christmas. Holy.
Awesome. Oh, and just a reminder from yesterday, we also have some T-shirts on sale, and they're outside this hall at the registration booth. For those of you who are just new, just a few housekeeping items, just to let you know that we will have a morning break, an hour lunch break, hopefully, and an afternoon break. We hope to wrap up, I believe, at, just wait, where's my, yeah, at 4:30, same time. We do have also breakout groups after our speakers this morning at 9:30 to 10:15. We'll probably be a little bit late for that one, but we'll also have a break. We'll also have a few other keynote speakers this afternoon, as well as this morning. We hope to have a best practices in asserting jurisdiction open forum as well. So, and other housekeeping items is for those of you who are just new to the gathering, there is washrooms on this side of the hall, outside in the hallway, as well as the escalators, near the escalators in the back. There's washrooms there onto the side. And for those of you who want to venture out, there are eating places. If you decide to go other places, other restaurants, we do have a Subway. I think it's on the east side of the building. East, he says, sure. East side of the building. We also have City Place, which is a couple blocks away if you decide to take a walk and have your lunch there. Is there anything else we're missing?
Yep. Our smudge room is still available as well, if in case you need a little break, a little spiritual break for yourself. If you want to go smudge your spirit and your emotions, there's a room just over around the corner there. Again, if you want to smudge your lungs, you can go outside and do that.
There was another thing that we asked the coordinators, and we really graciously accepted some of the comments, that actually quite a few comments in terms of how wonderful this gathering is, both Jason and I. We do have a number of coordinators, and we'll give them acknowledgements later. Most of them are usually at the registration table, helping to navigate and facilitate to make sure that you have a good experience here, a good learning and a good engagement experience here. I spoke to Lindy Crushane, who is one of the coordinators, and we do not have an evaluation as of yet, but we do have a hashtag. If you want to send your comments lifting up each other, it's hashtag, all caps, BOCH, as well as the hashtag BOCHA, which is the Bringing Home Our Children Act. You can also find that online if you type that in your search engine, Bringing Home Our Children Act. So you can find that there as well. And on our website, the First Nations Family Advocate website, we do have the Bringing Home Our Children Act, Bringing Home Our Children report with the recommendations. I'm sorry about that. It is 10:02. Should we just?
Yeah, let's just get into it. Okay. Looks like our first speaker this morning has finished his breakfast, and looks like he's ready to go. So I'm going to read his bio, and I'm going to do my very best to get the pronunciations correct. So here we go. His name is Christian Cookby. He's tribal chief for the, here we go. Hang on, I gotta go to my notes again. Oh my goodness. Hang on. Did you take my notes? You took my notes?
Okay.
She took my notes. Okay. I wonder if I left it over there. Can you check the other table? Okay. I'll just read from the bio here. Okay, so keynote speaker is Wayne Morgan from Christian Cookby, and the topic is We Are Ones We Have Been Waiting For. We are the ones we've been waiting for. And he's from the Splatsin de Shuswapm. Okay, I did my best. To the 60 scoop. Okay, so we'll do that. Here's his little bio, and I'm going to read that and learn some really interesting facts about him this morning, which was really amazing. He's a known and tireless, passionate advocate for recognition of the Aboriginal title rights and political grassroots level for the Indigenous nations and communities. He believes that the children are the future, and the future is right now. Whatever it takes, the time is now. Wayne Christian is I'm gonna get that wrong again. Okay, I have to go right back. Splatien to Shupshwapm ancestry. He's a proud father of 7 children. He has 30 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild. Incredible. He was re-elected for his 7th consecutive 2-year terms. Now it's a 4-year term as chief on January 5th, 2016. Christian has worked for over 40 years in establishing healing and health systems for Indigenous nations of BC. He is currently one of tribal chiefs of the nation, representing 9 of the 17 communities with responsibilities for children, Aboriginal title, and rights. One of Christian's greatest strengths is the commitment that his family is rooted in values and principles and traditions of the Indigenous nations. His leadership philosophy is based on exclusiveness, historical perspective, a strong belief in our sovereign land title and rights that are governed by our laws, our values, cultural traditions, and our connection with all creation. He believes strongly in the solutions to the issues in the communities that are rooted in minds, hearts, and spirits of the people who will deal with government-legislated genocide. Please give a warm welcome for Christian Cookby.
Hello, everyone. My Indian name is Big Voice That Speaks the Truth. And Jawa Kukpi Spalatsina Tasawhapm. I'm the chief of the people of Spalatsina of the Sawhapm Nation. I first want to acknowledge the ancestors of the land we're on here today and the present-day descendants. because we're taught that wherever we go in the four directions that we honor the people that have been there before us, your ancestors. So I want to acknowledge them here this morning. I want to say thank you to the organizers for inviting me here. I think that what you're doing is real critical work. What I'm going to do this morning is present a PowerPoint to you about the history of our community and our response to the 60s scoop. That culminates 40 years later. We're talking 40 years of development in terms of our own law and jurisdiction. And at the end of that, my presentation, we have a video. We've been, as a nation, we've been doing welcoming home ceremonies for our children that are in care. You should witness the work that we're doing on behalf of our children. So we wanted to present that to you at the end of this presentation. The story that I'm about to tell you is a story of my life and my family's life and my community. And it's a story that is not unfamiliar to a lot of you, because you've walked the same path that I've walked, that my mom walked, my brothers and sisters, and our communities walked through the what I call the legislative genocide of Canada and the provinces. They used their laws to kill us. And I'll talk about that and what I mean by that, because it's in my bio. I talk about legislative genocide. People say it's cultural genocide. It's not. It's legislative genocide. They use their laws to kill us, to kill the Indian and the child. So I think you need to know that that's, when we talk about Canada and British Columbia, that's the perspective I bring to you this morning. So what you see in front of you right here, this is the Secwepemc Nation. 180,000 square kilometers of territory. We're larger than 160 countries in the world. We have 32 campfires, our original communities. We today have 17 Indian act bands. We have a population of approximately 15,000 to 20,000 people. And we're one of those communities of the nation. I'm not tall enough to look over top here. Oh. In 1910, our chiefs presented to the Prime Minister of the day. It's called a Memorial to Sir Wilfrid Laurier. It's quite a powerful document, because what it is, it's a culmination of our interaction with Canada up to that point, and what we saw as a nation-to-nation relationship with Canada. It really talks a lot about coexistence. Because in our oral history, we know about the Royal Proclamation of 1763. We also know about the Treaty of Niagara in 1764. And our oral history talks about the gathering in Niagara and how the chiefs, over 2,000 of them, talked about implementation of the Royal Proclamation. And what that was really taking and putting in place a process where we would walk side by side and coexist with the newcomers to our land. In eastern Canada, it's known as the two-row wampum belt. We know it as coexistence, and that's what it was said in 1910 to the Prime Minister of the day. And it's really important, the first phrase they talk about, they say they have authority over us. They've broken down our old laws and customs. No matter how good we regulated ourselves, they laugh at our chiefs and brush them aside. It's really important because we had laws and processes in place before the white people invaded us and took control of our lives and made us wards of the state. And they say, the other quote they talk about, which is really important, it still exists today, is that minor affairs amongst ourselves which don't affect them in the least, we can easily settle ourselves, they drag into their courts. They enforce their own laws one way for the rich white man, one way for the poor white man, and one way for the Indian. Think about people like Colton Boucher. Think about people like that. Their laws are different for us. They're different for the poor whites that are on the streets, and they're different for the rich people, and we saw evidence of that through the last election. How much money they pour, the white people pour into government, and you get the sway of government. So this is still applicable today, 2019. So it's important to understand these concepts, because this is the way we see the world as a Secwepemc people. I'm a child of a survivor of residential school. I'm a former child in care. I had 5 brothers and 5 sisters, and we were apprehended in the 60s, part of the 60s scoop. You know, one of the things that happened for me is that I was the oldest male, and they separated me from my brothers and sisters because I was the agitator, right? I was the fighter. I would raise hell, and I would have probably. So they separated me from my brothers and sisters, and I lived by myself. And I used to run away. I ran away from those foster homes a number of times, and I can remember I was hiding in the closet at our place with my mom, and the police came and got me. And they took me back to the foster home. And I was about, I think I was 12 or 13, I can't remember, but what went through my head at that time is, what's the point? I've lost my connection to my family. Why am I still here? I really thought about taking my own life. I thought I was helpless and hopeless at that time. It created a lot of anger in me. I used to say I used to walk around with these big blocks of wood on my shoulders, not chips, big blocks of wood. I was angry. You know, a lot of and if you've been through the system, you know you get angry. And so for me, it was really about finding my way through the system. And I was fortunate enough in the last foster home I was in, a non-First Nations foster home, they actually treated me as a human being and treated me like one of their own, which was really powerful for me and a powerful experience. Because they reached out and helped me and took me out of that despair, because I ended up in jail. You know, I stole weapons, I cattle rustled, I stole motorcycles. I was just crazy. And spending time in jail that took my freedom away taught me a lesson. I was lucky, because I wouldn't be standing in front of you if I didn't change my life at that time. So coming out of that process, I think, is really important. People believe in you no matter what color they are. If they believe in you as a human being, you can rise to do great things for yourself. And that's what happened with me in my life. They believed in me. And it evolved into a process where I became involved in our community. I was first elected to our council at the age 23. And then 2 years later, I was elected as chief at 25. So I was just a baby. But the important thing for me was, as young as I was, at that time in our community, it was mainly old people that sort of ruled who became on council. And so the old people had their confidence in me to do something because of the way I spoke. Because when I spoke, I speak in such a way that I look for solutions for things. I don't just talk about the problem. We got to do something about this stuff, I kept saying to people. We have to do something. We can't just sit around. And part of my story is my brother's story, because he took his life in December 10th, 1977. I was a foster parent of him, the big brother. And it was one of the most horrific events in my life. It took me over 15 years, 20 years before I could actually even talk about it without breaking down, because I blamed myself for the loss of his life. I blamed myself for not doing enough for him. And he was only just 3 or 4 years younger than me. He was 18 years old. And the year after he passed, my mom passed. She passed of cervical cancer. And I used to go with my mom to her doctor's appointments. And it's a real racist system back then, you know. You think it's racist today, you sure saw it back then. They treated her as subhuman, as second class. They didn't provide any services to her. They kept telling her, there's nothing wrong with you, you're a hypochondriac, you're just making things up. And then when they finally said that, yeah, you have cervical cancer, it was too late. 5 years into seeing the doctor, and then she passed. And I remember the day she passed, I was sitting in a meeting at council, and I think, so a lot of what I do today and what I'm telling you today is I dedicate to my brother and my mother, to give them a voice for their lives that were lost too early. So it's important because, like I said, my story is not any different than a lot of your stories. You have the same kind of things that happen in your life, in your families, in your nation, in your communities. So it's important you know that. When I got elected in 1979, we had a mother that came to our council. She had 4 boys that were going to be apprehended. That's the term they use, apprehension, right? And she came to the council. We had a discussion at council, being myself and 3 council members. Our population at the time was about 350. So when we talked about it, we then uncovered that each one of us had been involved in the 60s scoop. In our community of 350, we had over 100 children removed. Almost every family in our community were taken from their homes. Think about that. Every family in our community, we were devastated by the 60s scoop. And so the importance of what we did is we had to do something about it. And as we're taught, and as a young man, I was a young chief, I was taught you ask your elders. You ask them, what do we do? Because they're the ones with the knowledge. We asked the question, how did we look after ourselves before they imposed white law on us? What did we do? And I think that's what's important. And you think and you look back and in your own histories, if you ask your elders, they'll tell you had systems in place. Before the Sama came, the white man, we had our own sky, our laws, our own courts. We have our own policemen and our own jails. We had a system, a law and order system in place that we governed ourselves with. So what we did in 1979 is we sat down with our elders and our people in our community, the youth, and we talked about what are we going to do. And over a year period of engagement with the community, we developed our community-based law. It's become known as the bylaw, but it's actually community-based legislation. We hired a young lawyer at the time. Her name was Louise Mandel. She worked with the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. She worked with us. And over that 1-year period, we wrote and codified the system that we were told this was what existed before the white people came to us, and we put that in place. It became known as what it says in the bottom sentence there, a bylaw for the care of Indian children. Indian Child Caravan, October 13th, 1980. The guy with the long braids in the center there, I don't know who he is. That's my son. He's 40 years old, sitting in the chair. He's 40 years old today. That's the legacy of this stuff. 40 years in the making to where we're at today. And the Indian Child Caravan was done purposely because the federal and specifically the provincial government would not recognize our jurisdiction. You know, there's that old saying went back and forth. What we uncovered is there's a federal-provincial agreement was put in place in the 1960s. Prior to the 1960s, there was no formal agreement between the feds and the province, and the percentage of Indian children in care was about 1% to 3%. As soon as they made that written agreement to pay, it jumped up to 30%. Indian children have always been an economic issue in Canada. The provinces live off the backs of our children, and they still do today. So think about that, because as soon as they put something in place that they paid money for children, the provinces jumped in and scooped our kids, and we were part of that scoop. We became part of the casualties, part of the stats, but we're not stats, we're people, we're human beings. So the Indian Child Caravan was really important because we had to assert our jurisdiction. You got to remember, this is 1979-80. There was no Constitution Act, Section 35 rights. That came later. We fought for that as well. All we had was the Indian Act, in Section 9124. And we were asserting our jurisdiction under Section 9124 of the British North America Act, which Indians and lands reserved for Indians. Because we said that that was a unilateral decision of Canada to define Indians and lands reserved for Indians as the Indian Act. They never spoke to us as per the Royal Proclamation, as per the Treaty of Niagara, to say this is our relationship nation to nation. So we asserted our jurisdiction under 9124. And part of that process was a bylaw process. The Liberal government at the time, John Munro was the minister. They have a 40-day window of which to either allow or disallow the legislation to come into place. Interestingly enough, he did nothing, which is a good thing. When they do nothing, it's usually a bad thing, right? But it was a good thing, because when he did nothing, it automatically lapsed into federal regulation. So sometimes when the governments don't do anything, it's a good thing. So they did nothing, and it lapsed into law, and so it became really important. So then we pushed the province, and that's what the Indian Child Caravan was about. Yeah, it was kind of interesting because the Indian Child Caravan was a political activist sort of process where we mounted a massive campaign to go to Vancouver to protest and for the province to recognize our jurisdiction. It was interesting because we did things like radio ads. We had radio ads on the radio through CBC Radio talking about the importance of our children. We did different things called staging areas where we staged in each community. And that was a lot of that was brought to us by a member that worked with us of the African National Congress, Jacob Maruli. He was assigned to work with me through the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. And he had a lot of political activism, and he was exiled to Canada. He was here in Canada. And so he worked with me, and we set up a process to mount a campaign, and that's what the Indian Child Caravan was. And he actually went door to door in the ritzy part of Vancouver, Shaughnessy, to find out where the minister lived, Grace McCarthy, and she actually answered her door. That's how we found out where she lived. And because we protested, we marched, and we detoured, and we took the march right to her house, is what we did. And so that ended up in a meeting with the minister, and she was also the deputy premier at the time. So on October 16th, I met with Minister Grace McCarthy, the Deputy Premier, and we're going back and forth and back and forth. Our lawyers were, lawyers get in the room, nothing against lawyers, but they have a tendency to draw things out and goes on and on and on and on, and they argue about legalese, and you're sitting there watching them and recognizing that we're not going to get anywhere. So the minister and I said, well, let's get our lawyers out of the room, let's do something. Let's make something happen here. So in the session I had with the minister, she kept saying on numerous occasions, but can you really look after your children? Can you really do this? That was the question she kept posing to me. And I said to her, look, when you make a mistake in your system, you can't correct it. Your system's too huge. It won't respond in time. If we make a mistake, we can deal with it right now. We make the jurisdiction of the decision-making authority for our children. So think about that. Jurisdiction is the ability to make a decision for your children, your families, right now, not waiting for government. It's a decision that you make for your children. That's what jurisdiction really ends up being, is being the decision makers. In your laws, you have a system that put people in place to make decisions for your children. The other thing that she really was concerned about, because we had, I think, about 30 children in care, she was concerned that we're going to go into those homes and yank those children out of those homes. And I told her, why would we do the same thing that you've done to us? That's irresponsible. We don't want to do that. If these children want to come back, we'll bring them back. If they don't, we'll work with the families to transition them back into the community. Because jurisdiction is being able to lay out a plan for your children on a long-term sustainable basis from cradle to death. And that's what it's all about. It's really, really important. So these are the 5 key messages we sent to the province, to the minister. And these messages today are still applicable in 2019, unfortunately, right across the country, even in British Columbia. First thing is they need to recognize our jurisdiction for our children and families. And jurisdiction means our laws and our ability to make decisions, our inherent jurisdiction, because we've always had that. We've never given it up. We wanted them to stop the apprehensions, the removal of children. If you don't stop that process, it'll continue to go on and on and on and on. And so you have to stop the apprehensions. And we wanted them to work with us for the children in joint planning wherever appropriate. Because we didn't just totally throw the province out because we recognized they had an infrastructure and a process in place. We wanted them to work with us for the children and joint planning, and that was important. I think that's really an important part of the process. The 5th message to BC is that we were going to go after the federal government for resources because we knew that federal provincial transfers were in place. We were going after those resources. And we actually entered into the initial 1980, a 5-year agreement with the federal government to look after the implementation of our jurisdiction at that time. So those are the 5 key messages. This was the interesting part. It wasn't on a napkin, it actually was on a legal pad. The Minister McCarthy actually wrote the agreement out. She sat down and in her handwriting it's on file, and she agreed to respect the authority of our council, take responsibility and control of our children. We would work to agree to an appropriate plan for the best interests of each child, and that we will develop the necessary resources. She wrote all this stuff out after we met. It was interesting because I give her a lot of credit because it was a social credit government, real ultra right wing, but she responded to us in a humanistic kind of way, really as a mother and grandmother, and to give us that ability to do the work that we've been doing since 1980. So I commend her. She's passed since then, but we're going to be doing a commemoration sort of through the BC Museum. It's a historical event of these things, and we're going to put together a display about this part of BC's history and the role she played as Deputy Premier in terms of our children. It's important. So my message to you is, you have any advocates and friends in the provincial government, bring them in and work with them. Teach them the human side of what you're doing, and bring your children home. In our jurisdiction, some of the key elements is notwithstanding residency clause 3A. Wherever our children are, we advocate we have jurisdiction for them, and we've been all over North America. We've been in Texas, we've been in Alaska, we've been right across the provinces in Canada. Wherever a child and family is in need of protection and help, we go. That's what jurisdiction is about. You go, you don't wait for the other authorities, and then you argue with the other authorities that their jurisdiction doesn't apply as yours does, because your laws are for your children. And so I think that's really important. The other thing is that any situation with children that's life-threatening, that's potential physical disabilities, etc., we intervene and look after the child. We have a young girl, she's 25 years old now. If we didn't intervene when we did 25 years ago, she probably would have passed, she would have died, because the feds in the province were saying, well, it's yours, it's mine, no, it's not yours, and back and forth. So our jurisdiction gave us the ability to go in and say, no, we're going to look after this little girl, and we're going to help her. I've been to the children's hospital with her about 3 times for operations she had. That's jurisdiction in action. You go and you help. You do everything you can to help the child, and that's what we did. Like I said, she's 25 years old today, and she invites us to her birthday party and thanks us. That's what jurisdiction in action is about, is doing those kinds of things. It's not just about neglect, it's about doing things you have to do for the children and the families. And we're the legal decision makers and legal guardians for all the children. So when things go wrong, it rests at our table. And we have liability insurance in place, actually 4 types of liability, because people are always in this world today are always looking to sue for whatever reason, right or wrong. They just see it as it's just the way Canada has become after the Constitution. We predicted it back in 1982, 83 that that's what would happen, and that's what's going on now in Indian country and right across Canada, actually, because of the nature of the Constitution. So fast forward to 2009. You remember, we're one community of 17 Indian Act bands and 32 communities of the Secwepemc Nation. What we have, other communities don't have. So we pushed really hard as a community for our nation to come together, to work together for our children. And we developed a unity declaration. The Samamuth, the first word is children in our language. We did this with all our chiefs in 2009, because it's important of one mind, one heart, one body, and one spirit. In our engagements with the communities, it really is about how do we begin to develop a national law, a Secwepemc law for children? And how do we have the foundation of that Secwepemc gene, or our language and culture? And one of the big issues we have to deal with in doing this work is healing the trauma in our communities, our families, our communities, the trauma of what's happened to our people. We have to heal that, because if we're going to look after our own, we need to heal ourselves, and that's important. We have to address those. We need to increase the resources. As you all know, that's a key factor. Improve the communication systems. You have to look over this thing, I'm short. And what we developed was a holistic response in our model, looking at what's called circles of protection. I didn't like the acronym, it says COP, you know. I still don't like the acronym. But it's about taking what would be called in today's language a social determinants of health approach to children and families, bringing in all the resources, whether it's addictions, housing, employment, social development, child welfare, education. You bring them all in, and you literally circling the children and family and providing a plan for them, a joint plan and that's kind of what we've been sort of working on and developing as part of our legislation. So a big piece of this was that we developed the real whole process of governance in our nation jurisdiction. We worked with the University of Victoria and their Indigenous Legal Research Unit, and we did a legal analysis of our oral history. And our oral history is our laws, and the stories of our ancestors that go back thousands of years. It lays out our laws for our people. So we were bringing those forward in a tribal casebook and our traditional laws and principles. We did a glossary of Secwepemc. There's over 600 and almost 700 Secwepemc words that describe children and relationship to family. And so these are the things that we're building on in terms of our jurisdiction. And again, it really is about how do we actually develop different processes than what exists. In our language, these have real significant meaning. Because when we did what we did in 1980, we wrote it in English on one side and Secwepemc on the other. We didn't put, like the laws in Canada are in French and English, right? We said, no, we're not French, we're Secwepemc. So we English and Secwepemc. And these are the key phrases that are in our legislation in the Secwepemc side. Kanukuntwak. What it really is we talk about helping each other, and it's not a word for just saying helping each other. It's an actual action, because our language is action oriented. Just don't say things; you actually do things. And kanukuntwak, real powerful word. We help each other. It goes through our whole society and our nation and all our communities. This is something that they took away from us when they put us in residential school, the ability to help each other. Kanukuntwak. Kosaltan, our relatives. When we say Huwaitis Ren Kosaltan, all our relatives, we're talking about all of creation, the four-legged, the winged ones, the rooted people, all of that. It's a real powerful term, Kosaltan, our relatives. And so that's in our legislation. Kumipala. And in our language, Kumipala also means council members, because the old people told me that as chief, you make the law, the council enforces the law. That's the way our system was. So these are really important terminology that we use and continue to use today. So our relationship with province has been interesting since 1980. We actually entered into a situation that we started to get a lot of pushback from the provincial government. It wasn't the NDP government, it was actually the Liberal government. There was 8 different ministers I tried to meet with to advance the original agreement that they would recognize their jurisdiction. We were in court in British Columbia in 8 cases, and they were advancing that we had no jurisdiction for our children outside of the reserve, and we said, bullshit. We have exclusive jurisdiction notwithstanding residency. We're going to take this fight on with you. So we filed a civil claim, a constitutional challenge to British Columbia in October of 2015. Really stating very clearly to the Premier is that we have an inherent jurisdiction for our children. Everything that you do is illegal. And so that really brought about the declaration in terms of affirming our jurisdiction for our children. But what it did is that litigation, or that civil constitutional challenge, and we put it in abeyance because I met with the Deputy Minister of the Attorney General and the Deputy Minister for MCFD. And we talked about where we're at. And they agreed to put we agreed to put the litigation in abeyance, and that means set aside. But I said the only way I'll do that is if you enter into an MOU with us, a tripartite MOU for our community and for the nation, with British Columbia and Canada, to talk about how we're going to develop jurisdiction. You got to remember, this is long before Bill C-92. We put that in place, and we actually then developed a tripartite MOU with the 2 federal ministers. It was the ISK and CERNA, or Indigenous Relations and Service, and then the MCFD minister. So we developed that MOU, and so we used the litigation to push that, because we felt as a community, we can't do this as one community, we have to do this as a nation. And so that's what we did in terms of process. So we actually signed off on this on July 23rd, 2018. And we've got the 2 ministers here, Bennett and Conroy, the province, and one of the federal ministers. We signed later we did a ceremony with Minister Philippot. We brought her into ceremony with the province, and we bound our relationship in a sacred way, because I really believe that ceremony, you always need to lead with ceremony. Open with ceremony, close with ceremony, but lead with ceremony. So we bound them to a process, and it was really, really important. The Deneza, the hereditary chiefs, are standing behind us here from the Wet'suwet'en. We have a peace and cooperation treaty with the Gitxsan Wet'suwet'en after the Delgamuth decision. And we enacted it and brought it forward. And they witness what we do, and we witness what they do. And it's really important. So our MOU really is talking about how do we establish a process to talk to the 2 levels of government, nation to nation with Canada, government to government with British Columbia, and setting out an operations process. And what that means is we have to deal with the day-to-day issues as we move towards jurisdiction. We have to set up a transition process, because in British Columbia we have delegated agencies, and we don't see them as the authority over our children, but we see them as a transition to our full jurisdiction and a jurisdiction process. So it's important we look at it in that concept, and that's what the MOU really is all about, and that's the work we're doing here today, presently today. And what's important, it's a tripartite process. You can't do it in isolation if you don't involve the other processes. So again, our SMAML team is we're setting up a community, what I call a community-driven process. Of the 1.7 million we have, 1.7 goes to the communities. Each community has the same allocation to do the work. I really believe you need resources in the community to do the work, not outside of the community. I have not changed the approach I've taken to this for 40 years. So part of that is developing our actual community coordinators and how they connect. And we just met with them yesterday. And I shared with them the history as from my own personal experience of why I do this work. And it's really important, the different engagements, it's a powerful process because it's about listening to the people, listening to the elders, listening to the children. Like what I told them yesterday, children don't learn by what they hear, they learn by what they see. They listen with their eyes. Children watch you and they see what you do. They don't listen to what you say, they listen to what you do. They listen through their eyes. So remember that. It's really important when you talk about bringing your children home. You know, what's going on? Is that happening? Do they see it? And so we developed a number of different things, and part of our nation process is developing seasonal gatherings. And your theme here today, bringing children home, which is done by the office, your advocate's office, is that we do that stuff in the nation. And we're going to show a video at the end of the presentation here that'll show you what that means to our children, what that means to the nation. And so it's really an important process. It's a large process, but we're dedicated to do the work. And the video, this is what you're going to see is the video. We did an honoring ceremony. Like I said, we do different gatherings, seasonal gatherings based on our nation work. And we honored 49 Secwepemc in spring of 2018. Oh, here's the video. It went right into the video, sorry. Can you just back it up, guys? Hey, what happened? You guys pulled a trick on me back there. So, which is the other slide? Oh, there we go. We have challenges, and I think we all have challenges with this stuff, but it's really about Bill C-92, and there's no, as you all know and have heard about, there's no sort of dedicated resources. So I think this is something we have to do nationally. We have to create those resources for all the communities to do the work, because without the resources, it's going to be difficult. And you have to look to the federal provincial transfer agreements that are in place already. And I've noticed your chiefs have been working on that. They're talking about here in Manitoba a provincial type law for your children. And you want to take those federal provincial transfer agreements and put them into your communities. And that's the right strategy. But you got to force them to do that. They're not going to give it up. They don't give up money easy, white people. That's my experience. So it is. But how do we actually, in our situation, we've got a whole bunch of different entities that work for children, so we're bringing them all together. It's a challenge. And I think that's what's important. So I'll leave it at that. I think if we could get the video up, but this video gives you a really good sort of picture as to where we're at right now with our children that are in care and what we're doing. So if you guys can bring up the video and play it with sound.
Children that are born today carry ancestors from 10,000 years ago. Think about that. That's how powerful our blood is, and we just have to revive who we are from the inside out. We have to heal from the inside out. And that's why I think it's really important we stand up our children and stand up laws for our children. Because if we protect the children, we protect our future.
So it's really important that our people connect with one another, reconnecting families, learning about who they are, their cultural identity, and who the Secwepemc are. Most importantly, learning our Secwepemc way of life, which is through prayers, songs, dances, the language, the culture, the practices, all of those that make us a distinct, important, Secwepemc nation, who we are.
For me, it's important to let these people know where they come from, that they do have a community, because without that, you don't really have a sense of belonging. And once you realize that, yeah, I have a community, I belong, you take a certain sense of pride in knowing that you have roots, you know where you come from.
Many of the children are in care, and it's about reconnecting them, letting them know who their families are, their communities are, and making sure that they have access to, membership, leadership, and that they don't and learn where they're from. The biggest thing is, being tied to your community, it's the land, and it's about the values and who you are, the identity.
The 60s scoop really was a removal of identity. It was a continuation of the residential school. I never went to the residential school, but I walked in the footprints my mom who did, and my grandparents who did. And all the things that were associated with that trauma we carried as children. We didn't know it, but we carried it. Myself, when I was going through the foster care system, a year after I was in care, I thought of taking my life at 13 years old. Because I thought, what's the point? I was hopeless and helpless. I ran away from my foster parents a few times to my mom. The RCMP came and picked me up and brought me back. And the last time that happened, I just had this feeling, what the hell's the point? I feel hopeless. And I thought, I must just leave, take my life. More children in care of the state right now than there ever was in the residential schools that operated at their needs. There's like 30,000 children in care. There's like 15,000 in the residential schools. It tells you something. This is going on day after day, and it's got to stop.
We've had enough of the children being taken away, and it was continuing going on, and we understood that if we came together as one, we have one voice, and be able to take that voice to Ottawa and let them know that we don't want to have that anymore. We want to have our own jurisdiction of our own children.
And the Indian Child Caravan was a concept that grew out of a plan to actually force the provincial government to do four things: to recognize our jurisdiction, to return our children, to plan for our children, and to get the feds on board. The impetus really was that we had to make a political issue out of something that just shouldn't be done.
And it was a demonstration of how we came together with the same familiar voice. And it was about the children, about keeping the children at home and not taking them away. So it was very powerful.
And I fast forward now, we're almost 40 years later, and we're in a situation where we're the only community in Canada of the 600 and some communities that have our community-based legislation. And so since 1980, we can tell you where every child is. Our population at that time was 350, now it's close to 1,000. So all the children that have been born since 1980, we know where they are and who they belong to. And they're not lost in the system.
So the blanketing ceremony, it's about wrapping them. It's wrapping them with their community love, their nature, their protection, and their nurturing. And it's about reminding them that, that we're all children and we all need to be nurtured, and that we're here for them.
The major part was having a blanketing ceremony for our youth and welcoming them back to the community, because a lot of them don't realize where they come from just because they live in the urban settings. They're not from our reserve, so it was really important to reach out and touch base with them, to let them know that they have roots, they have a community that supports them. When we did the blanketing ceremony, we told them that this blanket represents safety, security. You always know you have a community of 700 people behind you to help you and support you in whichever way we can to make you successful.
I just can't stress enough how important it is to be connected with your community. Without them, you're just one person. But as an entire community, you're much, much more.
Our job is to teach the next generation of young people that the nation and Sakakawulo is bigger than just one person. It's bigger than one family. It's bigger than one community. It's all 32 communities collectively together, all 15,000 Sakaka. That's what make up the nation. And that one child is connected to all 15,000 in some way of their relatives in the nation. And that's what's important. Yes, they have a place where they resided, but they connect. And that's what it's all about. Connection. It's really, really important.
The songs that you hear at a gathering, the more you learn about the songs, it's kind of like, it's just like feeling like as if you're being connected. It feels like the roots of your tree are now sinking deeper into the ground.
Being and knowing who you are and being able to state who your grandparents and your great-grandparents all the way back is really important for us so that we know, and people, when you introduce yourself, they can connect you and say, that's my consultant, this is who you are, this is where you're from. And you need to be able to do that so that when you do go out on the land and you talk and you tell the ancestors and everyone, this is who I am, they will know who you are. Our ancestors and all living beings will know who you are.
They need to know who they are. They need to learn their culture, their language, their spirituality. To do that in
During the genealogy workshop, we had a lady find out at that genealogy workshop she was from our community. And it was huge. The emotions, seeing her break down several times, realizing that she found her home. To me, that was powerful. That was amazing. It really hit home the importance of touching base with as many people as we can and letting them know they have roots, they belong, and they're welcome back in our communities anytime they want to come back.
You know, I cried when I seen all this, the children coming out and being embraced by the reserves where they came from. And it was so touching, you know. I like to see that happen with all our children, wherever they are, wherever they come from, you know, finding their spirit and be proud of who they are and where they come from.
And so it's really, really important as we move forward in this new standing up to Puffin law and recognizing the children and raising them up and blanketing them and recognizing who they belong to, that it's really healing for them because they think we've given up on them. And we haven't. Even if they're adult children, we haven't given up on who they are. You're important. Everything that you do from your life from now on, understand that you have this whole nation that's behind you. And that in your blood runs the blood of your ancestors that were warriors, that protected this land, that knew how to live off this land. That's something you're going to learn in your lifetime. So in your blood rests the blood of our ancestors. So that you as young people, you will grow up to be, people that will help the nation, whether you become a chief, whether you become a lawyer or a doctor, and truly being a doctor, learning your medicine, those kinds of things. That's what's important. Everything that you do from now on, understand you belong to the Secwepemc Nation. And your citizenship and your roots run deep in the ground where it's welcome to, and that you belong. And understand you will never ever be alone. And there's lots of things we do around ceremony and songs that can reconnect you with what your path is on life and your life path. So we welcome you back into the nation, and we look forward to you taking us to places we never thought we'd go as a nation. So you can see the importance and of connection. No matter where your children are, they need to be connected. I know that children from this province are all over the world, and they're finding their way back. Because when we were doing the work in 1979-80, we had a lot of our children were going AWOL from the group homes and foster homes and returning to our community. Once they started learning that we had our own sort of process in place. So wherever your children are in the world, just know that, and if you do it in our way, what we do is ceremony. We open a doorway up from the four directions, the eastern gate, the northern gate, the southern gate, and the western gate. Through ceremony, we open that up and we welcome the children, the spirit of the children back to their roots, to their home, to their homeland. Because when you do that, it opens up the path for them. You have to understand that. If you don't, you have to kind of understand the spiritual side of who we are. It's something we have not lost. People say, well, we don't have those things. We do. All you need to do is ask your ancestors for them and they'll bring them to you. And that's what's important. We have not lost anything. I keep saying colonization is a myth. They perpetuate it to keep you under control of you. If you think about colonization as 150 years of genocide, and that's what they've done through their laws. All they've done is disrupt our way of life. They have not killed us off. We are still here. Our blood is still here. The ancestors of your people are still here in your blood. Ignite that flame, light them up, and bring them back. Bring your children back. So I know there's lots of work to be done in this area, but just understand that the children are watching. They're waiting. They're waiting for you as the adults to open up those gateways for them, to bring them home. And so our experience is our experience, it's our jurisdiction and our laws, but you have the same thing. In your communities and your nations, you have laws. You have processes. You just got to stand them up. Because remember that colonization has disrupted that. We've got 10,000 years on the land. They've only been here 200 years. So remember, invest in that 10,000 years, because that's why we survived for so long. That's why our ancestral chiefs did treaties, nation to nation. That's why they didn't cede and surrender anything. We have our systems. Let's bring them back to life. And that, to me, is what Bill C-92 is all about. It doesn't do anything other than to get out of the way. It just says we recognize our inherent jurisdiction. And inherent jurisdiction means it's whatever you have in your communities have always been there. That's what's inherent to you. So bring it back to life. And I just hope and pray that as we do this work, that you do open up those gateways for your children and bring them home. And do it in a spiritual way first, because you need to open up those doorways. I was involved in a ceremony with the Stoney Nakoda. Their elders did a ceremony. There's little children there, about, they're really little, and they called the ceremony calling their spirits back, and it was a powerful ceremony. Because those children felt it, and you could see it. I could actually see the spirits in daylight. It was crazy. But you got to understand this stuff. It's there. You got to call their spirits back to make them whole again and help them. And you'll see a big change in your future and the future of your children by just doing that. So again, I welcome the opportunity to speak with you today. I won't be able. I'm just here just today, and I'm heading out because I'm also doing this work in British Columbia. I'm going to the Stalo Nation, which is in the Fraser Valley. We're talking with their matriarchs there about again jurisdiction and what they can do. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I think there's Q&A, correct? So I invite your MC back, and she'll take over. Okay. I gotta go this way?
Yeah, me good. Okay. Thank you so much, Wayne, Morgan, Christian, Kukpi. I know that people are waiting to go to breakout rooms, but before we go there, I just want to acknowledge Wayne for his wonderful words, and he summarized it perfectly with every child. They belong to a family, a community, and a nation, and their nation backs every child. Right? Yeah, they just don't stand alone. They belong to a nation. So thank you so much, Wayne, for your presentation. I have to apologize. In terms of honoring time, we do not have time for a question and answer. But you know what Wayne looks like if you want to go up to him to ask him a question or two. We do have breakout sessions right away. Family reunification is on 4A. How do we get from here to there is Marianne Clark, 4B. And the Eagle Urban Transitional Center Eagles Nest program is in S5W, 5W. Jordan's principal is in 6. So we'll return back here to the plenary's main room at 10:30, I believe, after break. So thank you very much, and you're free to go to your breakout session. Miigwech.